Good afternoon, everybody. Can I get just quickly, this isn't the AI talk, if you're, okay, AI talk's next door. Who's here because you couldn't get in next door? Or is this a room of AI skeptics? AI's not taking our jobs, we're fine. Who's here for some deep insights into team makeup based on 20 years of experience? Oh. I was hoping you wouldn't say that. We'll see. All right. So this is just a little bit of a preface. This is a talk that I've submitted that I'm giving at Agile on the Beach in a month's time. I think I submitted by mistake. My wife was out of town and I was at a loose end one evening and went through the AOTB submission and decided to have a go at something which I don't think people talk about enough. So here I am. Giving a talk at Geek today. So who am I? Actually, I've got a little bit of a disclaimer for this slide. There is one piece of AI in this presentation, AI text in this presentation, and that's this thing on the right. I haven't read this, so I'm not sure what it says. And there's only one image in this presentation which isn't AI. It's not touched up, it's just a few years ago. That's me on holiday. But every other image you see in here is Gemini AI generated, so hopefully I'm okay with copyright, but we'll see in a moment. So, I mean, I look around the audience here. I was going to ask the question: who doesn't know what this is supposed to be? I think AI's done a pretty good job, I think, with that, and hopefully skirting some copyright laws. Yeah. Yes. So, for those that don't know, this is Blockbuster Video. Was a global chain of VHS, predominantly rental. Peak millennium, certainly for me. 1999, 2000, Friday, Saturday night, go down with your mates, get the latest new release. I don't know, Sixth Sense at the time. I had to go back and see what was out in 1999. Matrix, maybe Fight Club, get a pizza, go home, and this was how you consumed movies back then. But a little bit about Blockbuster, a couple of interesting points about the company. So as I said, this was 2000. Company was very successful this time, renting VHS cassettes. They turned down an offer, I didn't know this, they turned down an offer at the time to have exclusive rights from Warner Brothers to distribute DVDs, to rent Warner Brothers DVDs, and they said they didn't need that. They were quite happy with the VHS model they had at the time. They didn't need exclusive rights from a major studio. And then perhaps more famously, maybe more known to this group, a few years later, Blockbuster was offered the chance to buy a new startup called Netflix for $50 million. And John Antioco, the CEO, and his team laughed at them. They couldn't believe that they wanted $50 million for this startup streaming company. There's a quote I found from John saying that the dot-com hysteria is completely overblown. They were very happy doing what they were doing. They didn't need to change. They perfected this model, customers renting and returning late. Blockbuster is a late fee revenue company, they're not a rental company. And 9,000 stores globally. And it was successful at 2000. It continued to be successful for a number of years. It was a slow decline. It wasn't like there was a single big event that caused them to fail. But what they did suffer from was a lack of change, a lack of introspection. They didn't change their business strategy. They didn't change their management team for a long time. And that complacency just led to, in 2014, they wound up operations completely, except for that one store in Oregon, I think, which might still be there. But yeah, this is a unique story. You got lots of other examples. Companies like Kodak. We'll see how old this room is actually. Or more interesting, who doesn't know these companies, I guess. But companies like Kodak, BlackBerry, Nokia, MySpace, that was a good one. And actually, I found quite a few analogies in entertainment industry as well. You think about bands like U2 or Guns N' Roses or the Beatles, who had these were very successful, had peak time, but most people would argue that their output perhaps didn't continue at that level, that level of quality over time. So, quickly, what is wrong with long-lived teams? Now, I've got half a dozen things which I believe are the main problems with a long-lived team in an organisation. First one is that over time they stop adding value. We'll talk about these in more detail shortly. Over time, they start to drift away from what the organisational architecture is supposed to be at that point in time. And any organisation doesn't stand still. The architecture changes over time to reflect their changing position in the market. It's unlikely that the team that you have in place is a perfect match for that. The needs of the team change. You need the kinds of skills that exist on the team need to change to match what you're trying to deliver. And then from an organisational perspective, a long-lived team creates a lockup of knowledge and expertise. You've got people in here who you've got a high-performing team that's done some amazing stuff, but your rest of the organisation isn't benefiting from that. And this one, an echo chamber is created. Long-lived teams tend to stop asking good questions, stop questioning why things are done. Even a change in a new person coming into the team can be hard for them to change the way the team operates, change the direction the team's going in, and finally, just sometimes a long-lived team isn't very fun for the people in the team. So that's not good for your organisation, for your retention. Now, at this point, some of you might be wondering what's happened to me in my career to have this hatred of teams. Where was I hurt? Who did it? Which client was it? But no, I've spent a lot of my career working with many of you in this room. 2, 3, 5 years is, well, 5 years is exceptional, but it's a normal length of time for me on an engagement. So I work at organisations for a long period of time. And in some of those cases, I found myself in a team I've liked the people on the team, we've been doing good stuff, and I've been guilty of just feeling complacent and not wanting to change. So, this isn't a outside-in kind of thing. I'm complicit in this damaging organisations through long-lived teams. And I have to say that there's been a little bit of cheeky clickbait with the title, because what I really mean is stable long-lived teams is what's damaging to organisations. And so I talk just a bit more about that. So when I talk about a stable team, I'm talking about a team that outlives its welcome, where the team persists in a stable structure without any change in its design, its direction, its people, where the team over time ceases to be able to deliver the thing that it set out to do. And I mean, there's a lot of AI imagery. You'll see this is someone that's outstayed their welcome, a house guest, I think. And this could be a few months, could be a few years before a team reaches this point. I think if you start to see this after a few weeks, I think that points more towards organisational challenges and a lack of consistent strategy, or the team was set up incorrectly to start with. But I think it's that kind of timeline. And just to be clear, when I talking about stable teams, I mean when there's as I said, no change in personnel, no change in direction. A lot of you will know this already, but I'm a firm believer that products and services should have continuous ownership by a team. It's just that team doesn't have to be the same individuals. Products need to be constantly owned by the organisation. A team that owns the product is responsible for it, for its changes, for live operations. So the lifespan of a team and the product is intertwined. It's just that the team that owns a product could change from time to time. There needs to be that constant ownership. And there are examples where healthy, high-performing teams can live for a very, very long time. This analogy here, the ship of Theseus, which is a thought experiment about if a ship is constantly, if planks wear out and the mast is replaced and every piece of the ship is replaced over time, is it still the same ship or not? Which is an interesting question, I think, but actually it's more interesting that more to the point, I think the product still exists. The ship is still afloat. It still works. I don't really care whether it's the original ship or not. Or Trigger's broom here for those who, like myself, lacked a classical education. Only fools and horses for Again, I'm not Australian, so I don't really know what that means, but that's what it is. And actually, there's another really good example which I came across, the Ise Temple in Japan, which is every 20 years it is deliberately rebuilt from scratch, and this is done as this temple is an important cultural religious icon, and in order to maintain it, in order for it to continue to be pristine, to be useful as a place of worship, it has a rigid cycle of being completely rebuilt. But it's still the same temple. It's just that it's made of completely different materials. And I thought that was a really interesting analogy, that deliberate act of reconstruction to ensure that the temple maintains its ability to do its job. Yeah. Oh, and I should just quickly say, there's for those that follow Dan North, Daniel Tierhurst North, he's advocated a model where each quarter, I'm just going to quote here, each quarter the entire program team, anything from 20 to 200 people, reorganize themselves based on the expected demand for the next quarter. And I think that's probably taking it too far. That would be quite an aggressive model, and that would probably be damaging to the organisation as well. So back to the 6 things that are damaging about teams. This first one, value. I've got a quote here, on a long enough timeline, the survival rate for everyone drops to 0. It's someone called Tyler Durden. I couldn't actually attribute it. I don't know what it's from, so it's a little bit of a, yeah. And actually, I think this one, if you're lucky enough, you're working in a rational organisation where decisions around funding and value inform budgeting, informing expenditure. And I think it's really easy for an initial business case to be satisfied, for a team to be stood up, for a piece of work, a product to be delivered, and then that completes and the team still exists. And there's a large cost to run a standing product team, and it could be a really, really great team. Maybe you've been on these teams or you've had a great time, but it's important to constantly check, are you still delivering value once that initial piece of work has been done? And it doesn't mean the entire team needs to be disbanded, but I think it's important to recognise, to be conscious of the value that you are delivering as part of a team or a leader, a manager of multiple teams. A bit more now about the architectural misalignment. So this, I was thinking about how things like domain-driven design and team topologies allow us to create structures in an organisation, teams that satisfy the needs of the organisation at a particular point in time. You've got a nice domain boundary that encapsulates the work your team's doing. I've got an example. You might have a team set up to deliver timesheets. You're named the timesheet team because you don't use a silly name, and so you've done all the right things. You're working fine. You've delivered the timesheets application. There's a backlog of work to continue with. That's great. And then the organisation is going to launch an invoicing tool. So there's another team stood up, the invoicing team, and they start going about their work. But now you find that your team is spending a lot of time talking to the invoicing team. And when I say talking, there are dependencies. The invoicing team and the timesheet team, you want to share an identity portal or something. Your services become intertwined. And this can point to, and I think we've all seen this, where you have a team where the number of dependencies on external teams can ramp up. And I think it's at this point that it's worth thinking about whether you're still architectural alignment is still where it needs to be. Perhaps you've reached a point where the way the teams are structured no longer fits the architecture. Maybe there's a personnel portal which needs to exist, and the timesheet, the identity component is wrapped up with the invoicing and the timesheet. Maybe you're actually supposed to be one team now because you're so dependent on each other. So I think that's one way that without change you end up reducing the value you deliver. This one's a bit easier, software architectural misalignment. I used the example from before. This is just where the team no longer has the right skills to deliver the product that they own. So you think about the timesheet example again. you've had an amazing team, you've done a lot of lots of user research, you've built this tool which everyone in the organization loves. People are now entering timesheets daily because they love it so much. They can't wait till Friday. They're doing it every single day. And this has got the attention of the finance team because they now see that they can do forecasting at a much more granular level. They can do live daily forecasting for revenue. So that means that your product manager's got lots of demand for new work. You're now looking at your backlog for the next couple of quarters is now full of API integration work with the finance system. It's fantastic demand. Your product's been successful. The organization loves it, but for some reason it's taking you a long time to deliver that work because your team structure is set up to do a lot of user-centered front end design. You've got one back end dev who's the only person doing the API integration. It's taking forever. So, I mean, what I see happen in these situations, as well as the team being slow to deliver, the team then starts to pick up work because most people don't want to be sat around doing nothing. They want to be busy. They want to feel like they're delivering value. So you end up with a bunch of front-end features being delivered because there's capacity in the team, even though they may not be the most valuable thing for the organization. And again, it's just an artifact of not changing. Knowledge lockup's a bit obvious, but it's one of the hardest things for a team to kind of acknowledge themselves, because when you're in a team and you're working with great people and you're delivering great things, the last thing you're thinking about is how do I split this team up? How do we get rid of people and move the knowledge elsewhere in the organisation? So I think it's quite obvious, but it's one of the harder. It's more of a it's not something which a team often recognises internally. And the echo chamber. So this, actually first, these are all AI images, right? But does anyone know what's wrong with this picture of an echo chamber? Yes. It's a smarter audience than I was expecting today. So yeah, the ideas that led to the team's initial success continue to be championed. It's very hard to introduce new ideas. It's very hard to change. I mean, I've certainly been on teams myself where after a couple of years, you just like, no, we've tried that 3 times before. It didn't work. Let's just get on with it. And you want a bit of a quiet life sometimes. You just end up with a stale team that lacks innovation. And a lot of the things that made your team successful initially, just you stop doing them because the things you were doing initially were agitating for change and doing things differently. And now you are the status quo. And finally, this, again, a bit obvious, but a long-lived team can end up being not fun sometimes. Even if everybody's if it's a happy, well-functioning team in the beginning, personalities can start to grate after a while, maybe. You just find you're not getting on with your teammates, or you have examples where the team a really good team is continually pushed to deliver against unachievable timescales, and the team burns out and fatigue. So again, all of these things are damaging in a long-lived team. So if these things are so bad, why do we have them in the first place? Why do we have these stable teams why do we see these stable teams in organizations all the time? And for me, I think one of the big things is setting up a team is an expensive exercise. I don't mean in terms of salaries and paying people. I mean the effort involved in finding the right people to join a team is very high, especially if you're trying hard. It can take a long time, and getting a group of people all together on the same date to start is almost impossible. So you end up with people not being busy for a period, or the team just not having the right expertise it needs from day one. Sorry, what was I going to say? Yeah, so they're expensive to set up. And then once you do get the team in place, it takes a lot of work to get them working well. I think there's quite a heavy number of delivery leads in this room. I think a lot of you found part of your job is to create a high-performing team, and it's not easy. So it takes a lot of effort. And I think it's just, in most cases, most organizations are set up with the idea that there's an organizational function, you have a team that does the function, and once you've done once that's in place, it just stays. That's the default operating model. And a lot of that is just to say that humans, especially humans that work in agile software delivery, in my experience, don't like change. It's not a natural thing to do. I mean, who's worked on a fantastic team and not wanted it to end? You wanted to keep delivering with that same group of people. You've got a product that people are happy with, and the instinct is to keep doing more of that. It's not, it can be quite an unnatural thing to think, how do we stop this happening? There's one more reason that I'm going to talk about, which is a bit more subtle, a bit more. I don't know. It's one that I really dislike, and it's because it's quite deliberate, and it's this mantra of bringing work to teams. So this idea that a team is high performing, has delivered something great, probably won awards at a awards dinner, and then instead of saying, okay, what's the next most important thing for the organisation to do? What do we need to set up to deliver that? It's, we've got this high-performing team. What work can we give them that they can do another good job on? And the chance of finding something which is the exact right fit for that team at that point in time is just so low. I just think it's because people don't want change. They want to try and replicate the success from that existing team, but by actually using the same group of people. So I think this can be quite a dangerous thing, and I do see it happen quite often. And I recognise that a lot of the time this came out of a world where teams were very ephemeral. They were stood up for a project, and that once that was delivered, the team disbanded. So you didn't have this long-lived, this concept of a product being owned by a team in the long for a long time. But I do think that just creating work or finding work to give to good teams can be really damaging to an organisation. So, if we've got, because all organisations have this problem, how do we fix it? Probably this AI guy in the middle, I don't know what's wrong with him. It's best not to look too closely. So when you put a prompt in, Gemini gives you a bunch of images. This was the least worst one. Some of the others are... Yeah. There was some that was verging on not safe for work. So how do we fix it? And like I said, inertia is so great in this space. It's really difficult. It's people don't want to change something when it's working well. You're not looking for excuses to bring new people into the team. And if a team is unhappy, if people are unhappy in a team, often even that. People need to be really unhappy before they'll move, when actually for themselves and for the organisation, maybe for the team, if it's a personality clash, it'd be better if it was easier for them to do that early on. So there's actually, this makes me think of, I'm sure many of you have read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow book, all about cognitive biases, availability bias, anchoring bias, and I don't remember a lot of the different biases, but the thing that stuck with me most from that book was a statement early on which said, this book isn't about teaching you how to stop having these biases because they're inbuilt. A lot of them are biologically wired into us. But what it's trying to do is make it visible so that you can recognise when it's happening, or if you're a leader, you recognise when it's happening in teams. And I think that's probably the best we can do in a lot of these circumstances. So, in that first case, if a team isn't delivering value, what do you do about it? And I think, as I said, the first thing is to be self-critical. And I think this is where, if you're in a agile product team, you're probably running retrospectives, and I think that creates an opportunity for you to ask the question regularly: Are we still adding value? Does this team still spark joy for the organisation? Should we still be here? And I think that's an important question. Often the questions in retros can be a bit unsophisticated, a bit just what are we doing well, what do we want to do more of, rather than what value are we delivering, and how do we check that we're still delivering what we were doing before, and perhaps asking pretty probing questions about, are we set up correctly, and with it, as part of the team, the product manager, are you delivering the most valuable things for the organisation? especially if you're a high-performing team, if you're not delivering the highest value, then it's the organisation is losing out. And I think if a team does recognise that, having a grown-up conversation with your management, with your leadership, is really powerful. I think I would be very shocked if a senior leader turned down a meeting request saying, I'd want to talk to you about the fact that I think our £1 million a year investment is not delivering value. They might not enjoy the conversation, but they're not going to turn it down. So I think, I think that's something you can do as part of a team. And conversely, as a leader of teams, you need to be asking these questions proactively of your teams, asking them to, it's not about justifying their existence. So are you doing what am I doing to help make sure you're delivering the most value to the organisation? Architectural alignment, I talked about this a little bit before. I think there's a lot of strategies you can use now in terms of modelling architecture and to understand whether your organisation, whether your team is set up correctly for your organisation's goals. I think there is a big role here that enterprise architects or solution architects can play. If your team isn't close to those people in the organisation, seek them out, bring them in. And I mean, sometimes they're left to themselves, and they would relish the opportunity to have those conversations. And especially when you're saying we're not sure that we're set up correctly, can you help us understand what the architecture looks like today, or what the architecture is looking like in the future, so you can even plan ahead to make sure your team is set up and be proactive, be part of those conversations when new pieces of work come along. Don't wait for a new piece of work to come to your team. Look at the work that's coming to your part of the organisation, because perhaps your part of your team's remit would fit in there, and if that's the case, it may need a restructure in the way the teams are set up so that the teams map to the architectural components that are being delivered. This one's pretty straightforward. If you're seeing this is the example where you can't deliver the back end for the timesheets. Again, you're lucky if you're working in a high-performing agile team, you'll be able to spot these bottlenecks that you've got a bunch of tickets queued up that can't be worked on because you don't have the capacity in the team. The WIP limits will help you show where you have capacity constraints in various skills. And of course, then it's a conversation about changing the shape of the team. Knowledge lockup. I think this one, again, as I said earlier, the team is very unlikely to try and change this themselves. This is where it really is an organisational challenge. And I think one of the best things an organisation can do is set expectations that rotation is a part of your role, that there's an expectation that you go into this area for 12 or 18 months and then you move into another team. And make new opportunities public, visible to people in the organisation, allow people to put their hand up, champion when someone takes that step and leaves the team. It doesn't have to be seen as they're leaving their team in the lurch. It should be celebrated. I think there's a lot of organisational culture that can be done in that space, and that means you need to work closely with your HR people team, because they're the ones that are going to have to pick up a lot of the work for increased rotations. But it's a very, I think it's a much better way of sharing knowledge and expertise around the organisation than creating documents of guidelines and blueprints and things. And actually, this brings me on to this point. This is my thing. Culture eats long-lived, stable teams for breakfast. And I think if you have a culture within you, the culture you establish within a long-lived team will outlive the people in that team. I've seen long-lived teams who look after a product for many, many years where the entire staff of the team has changed over the years, but the team still has the same reputation, the same delivery capability it had before. And that's the second point here. Someone who's got loads and loads of knowledge, it will be okay if they leave. I know it doesn't feel like it at the time, and especially you might have stakeholders who are really, really reticent. And you have to, if you're worried about it, you're thinking about how to make sure things are okay. But I can't think of an example in my career where I've seen a crucial person leave a team and everything actually fall apart. It will be okay. And I think organisations need to hear that more often and need to recognise it. The echo chamber one, again, it is really, really hard to spot internally. I think that the way to solve this kind of problem is the same answer as the previous one. Just make rotation normal, make it happen as much as you can, and give people those opportunities. And this, I've lost the, no, there we go. If a team isn't fun, if it's not working anymore, it's got to be, so I think having high psychological safety in the team is important, because that means you can start to surface some of these issues. But really, again, you need a people team or leaders who are looking at the team and making sure it's possible to rectify some issues in the team. And like I said, sometimes if it's a personality clash, you might have two people that have worked in many, many high-performing teams before. They come together in one team, it just doesn't work out. We're human beings. Sometimes that's the case. Make it easy for that to undo, or for those people to move to different teams. So given those are all the challenges, those are all some of the ways you can fix them, but what would a high-performing, long-lived team, or stable, well, not stable, high-performing, long-lived team look like? And I had to go through so many iterations to get this one. Some of them were not. I think I've touched on all of this, but make sure the team exists for a very clear reason. The team needs to know at every point in time what the value is that they're delivering, and that needs to be something which is constantly reinforced, re-articulated. It's got to be. It's not enough to set up a team and expect it to run for multiple years without any change. It's got to be a constant process. But also a team that's not afraid to change shape, calling out when we don't have the back-end capability to deliver the roadmap for the timesheet system. Maybe we need more capability. Or I'm not really busy. I don't feel like the work I'm doing is adding value. I think I should rotate somewhere else. It's there's a kind of feels like a grown-up conversation to have, but it's important for a high-performing team. And with the architectural, always look at your dependencies. It's very easy for the number of dependencies a team has to slowly creep up over time. And if you find yourself in that situation where it's so hard for you to deliver anything without 7 other teams doing some work, it might be that the systems that you and the other teams are working on are not, the ownership model is not correct, and it's time to do a bit of do an exercise in domain modeling and see maybe there's a better way that these teams and services can be distributed, so you get back to the point where you're achieving much greater delivery of value. So, in summary, the problems with stable, long-lived teams, they stop adding value. They no longer fit the enterprise architecture. You've got too many dependencies. You're not able to deliver. Maybe the people in the teams don't have the right skills for the work you're doing. From an organizational perspective, they lock up knowledge and expertise, which is just self-harm for the organization, or making it more expensive to develop that expertise. People learn through doing, and being able to work with people that have done it on another team is a much better way than attending a webinar or a conference talk. You get the echo chamber problem. Teams aren't bringing in new ideas. It's hard for internal innovation to exist, or they just stop being fun. And the things you can do from a team perspective, internally within your team, always be self-critical. Champion psychological safety so that people feel able to say when they're not busy, when they're not working, when things aren't when they're not delivering value at the rate they want to. And externally, as a leader, as a manager, invest in people, invest in that building a culture of rotation and change for the organisation. Make change normal and expected. And really, there's one overriding thing, which is to just constantly question what you're doing as a team. Are you still delivering that value that you want to be? If you're doing that on a regular cadence, then I think a lot of the other stuff will take care of itself. Thank you very much.